This game is really exciting, lasting just 21 moves. It was played between Alireza Firouzja with the white pieces, a rising superstar, chess prodigy, world number 2, and the exciting, charismatic genius Vasyl Ivanchuk playing with the black pieces here. So this is an online match. It was played in December 2020. This is rapid play, so they have 10 minutes plus 5 seconds a move. The full details of the match can be seen below, and this is game 2. So Alireza won the first one with black. Can he keep the streak going with the white pieces? So he kicks off here with pawn to d4, and we quickly go in for this Trompovsky system with bishop to g5. He does like to dabble with these queen's pawn games, bishop f4, bishop g5. Vasyl goes pawn e6, very principled. We have pawn e4, so this is white's idea. You set up the big centre very quickly, even though you're ceding the bishop pair in a lot of lines. And the main way to play here is with pawn to h6, white gives the bishop, queen recaptures, you get the centre, game goes on. But instead of pawn to h6, here Ivanchuk goes pawn to c5. An unusual way to play. Now it looks like you're losing a piece after, say, pawn to e5, which is what Alireza played. But actually you can now go pawn h6, kick that bishop. Alireza comes all the way back to c1 here, but if he had come to h4, then you carry on with pawn to g5. If takes here, then takes here. This is good for black. And if you instead retreat the bishop to g3, then again knight e4 is good for black. You're picking up the bishop pair. Black has a fine game and has equalised. So this bishop came back to c1. Now we had knight h7, a really weird looking move, although it is actually the top move when you run this through the engine, so Ivanchuk knew what he was doing. If he comes to d5 there, then he's running into pawn c4, so that's one of the challenges. So knight h7 played. Now it looks weird, that knight could be getting trapped out of the game, but later on Ivanchuk wants to go pawn d6, exchange these ones off, and then it can come back into the game. So first we had pawn d5 from Alireza. There was tension in the centre there. He could have considered c3, but instead he kicks on, and now Ivanchuk immediately challenges that centre with pawn to d6. When white has the space and the centre like this, you have to challenge sooner rather than later so as not to get too cramped. Now best here was actually bishop to b5, throwing in this check, but Alireza goes knight to c3 here. And the way Ivanchuk should respond is by taking on d5. When you go like this, now you can say recapture with the queen. You don't want to allow black to take here if you took with the knight. And now knight c6, black's getting a decent game. Soon these pawn tensions will be resolved and the knight can come back in here. But instead of taking on d5, Ivanchuk got a bit spooked by the bishop b5 move. He goes pawn a6. And this allows Alireza to now go knight to f3. So he's developing quite quickly in the centre. Black has to be careful. And now you have to take on d5 as black, for the reason being that after knight takes back here, you then get some rapid development going with knight to c6. Soon you'll get your bishop out here and so on. But what Vasyl does is take on e5. This allows the knight to jump into e5. And now you can't take on d5 to resolve that central tension because the queen comes in here and black's in trouble. You're threatening mate here. If you swap the queens, then this knight jumps in with menace. It's looking to check here. You can't even go bishop d6 or knight c4 comes. That bishop's getting kicked around. There's a check coming. Big problems. And if instead of trading the queens, you go queen to e7, well, it's just a massive initiative for white. The bishops will be developing very fast. The king is getting castled queenside. Big problems coming. So we didn't have this captures on d5 on the board. Vasyl recognised this, and instead he goes knight f6, developing into the game. And now there's one move here for white to really keep a strong initiative. Can you find what Alireza played? And if you're enjoying this video, do hit that like button to let me know, and consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already to never miss a game in this series. So here, Alireza played the excellent bishop to c4. And the reason this is such a fantastic move is because it holds the centre here, as we can see, but it also calculates the fact that black can't go pawn to b5 here. Now Vasyl didn't play this, but if he had, then Alireza wouldn't have retreated that bishop. Then black is picking up on d5, you're in trouble. Instead, he would have captured here. Now the queens would come off like this, and if you capture that bishop on c4, then we take here with check, supported by the knight. Let's say the king comes to d8, now the knight comes to g6 anyway, and you're hitting rook, you're hitting bishop, so if the rook tries to save itself, then you pick up the bishop here, the whole thing is collapsing, it's much better for white. So Vasyl saw this, he didn't play pawn to b5. In this position here, he went bishop d6, he attacks this knight, but once again, excellent calculation from Alireza. He's such a tactical wizard, he just ignores that threat and he takes on e6, giving an entire piece. Now best here would have actually been recapturing the pawn with the bishop, but I can understand why Vasyl didn't do this. After captures, pawn recaptures, you're resigning yourself to a really miserable position. This knight could come here soon or here. You know, the light squares are looking awful for the black king. So coming back here, instead Vasyl took up the challenge of taking the piece. He captured on e5, but this allowed takes on f7 with check. The king is forced to e7 here. If you come to f8, then white would swap the queens and actually win the queen. In this line now, the queens stay on the board, but we had queen e2. It pins this bishop to the king, and this is a massive problem for black. So knight c6 played to hold that bishop for just a moment, but white can now proceed to attack the bishop again. You could go bishop f4 here. Instead, Alireza goes pawn to f4, and now bishop g4 hits the queen, but it just nudges up to e3, maintains the pin against the black king. And now Vasyl plays the best move. He's down low on time at this point. He goes queen to d4, so he's attacking this one. If you capture, well, that's a big blunder. Now black simply takes back and is completely winning. So we didn't have the capture on d4. Instead, Alireza takes here, and now again, you don't want to take here as black, or you develop the bishop into the game with tempo. Now when you take here, you're losing this one with check. So we didn't have that capture on e3. Instead, black took here immediately, and now white went knight d5 check. Vasyl was super low on time. He had about 20-30 seconds to go when he actually made this move, and he made a blunder. So he captured the knight, which looks so normal, but actually his best was takes here. And then actually white has nothing better but to capture the queen, pawn recaptures, takes here with check from the bishop, but actually the king can just recapture. And although white is still better, there's castles coming, bishop d5, black is in the game, the pawns are level, okay, the game's still on, it's a rapid play at the end of the day, anything could happen. But coming back here, Vasyl chopped on d5, we had a captures here of the queen, pawn recaptures, bishop takes, and now it's really tough for black. The king's about to castle, white's got the bishop pair, the black king's exposed, this pawn is weak, really tough. And that's why black didn't capture here, running into this castle stuff, lots of pressure. So instead d3 was chucked in, just trying to shake it up. Don't capture that one or you're running into checks, why start going in for all of that? So Alireza just castles, the pawn captured on c2, the time's ticking down here, and actually after pawn to b3, Ivanchuk lost on time again for 2 games in a row. Is this match going to be a runaway, or can he fight back? Well, it's a super exciting match, I'll tell you that much. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and see an amazing playlist of Magnus versus Alireza, click here. Thanks for watching and see you soon.